Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started so we can start right on time. I know y'all have plenty of things on your list today to accomplish, so I want to be respectful of your time and go ahead and get started. If you would, if you haven't already, go ahead and mute your computer. That way we can hear Michelle and there isn't any, hopefully, echoing or back noise. So I hope you'll continue to join us. If this is your first time participating in the Clear Up the Chaos Power Hour, welcome. These take place the second Tuesday of every single month, and we cover hot topics that other employers are struggling with, and this gives you an opportunity as well to ask any questions that you might have been struggling with during this month. Joining us is Michelle McCarter. If any of you have attended some of our seminars, she has participated and been the speaker at many of those, and we value her expertise and input always. So we're excited to have her joining us again this morning. Feel free to send me questions that you might have via the chat box. That's a great way to get those questions to me, and I can then funnel them to Michelle. But we will go ahead and begin with the hot topics that we emailed out for October. And I'm going to start off, Michelle, just at the beginning. So if someone has a 1099 employees, if they have 1099 employees, can you visit with us about the distinctions between EEs and IC, and also speak to those abbreviations should someone not fully understand what those abbreviations are?
Sure. So I use the word 1099 employees because I hear it all the time. So we specifically put that out, but technically there is no category. There's no such category as 1099 employees. You are either an independent contractor paid with a 1099, or you're an employee of an organization and paid through payroll with taxes and requirements under FLSA for minimum wage and overtime that you're obligated to follow. Can you hear me, Elizabeth? I had some mute thing come up. Okay.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Sorry. All right. So the reason I chose this topic right now is because currently the Department of Labor is proposing a new set of criteria to determine if somebody is an employee or an independent contractor. So it's, like I said, there's no such thing as a 1099 employee. Now, I've heard of companies paying employees with a 1099 maybe during the probationary period, or paying them as a trial run until they decide that they're there, or maybe bringing them on, calling them a temporary and paying them with a 1099. So all of those things would be wrong. So what you're looking at is the function that the person serves within your organization. So are they a worker where you control their work, their schedule, how they do things, or are they somebody that you hire to do a specific job? So the Department of Labor is proposing what they call an economics realities test. I'll go over in a little more detail what that means. Currently, it's in a 30-day comment period. So that comment period will close about the 22nd of this month. And what that means is you as employers get to go in and make comments, and they'll consider those comments in, finalizing the final rule that's coming out. So basically, there are a couple ways you can classify employees. There's full or part-time, there's exempt or non-exempt, and that's how you would classify employees. So the major misclassification out there that would cause that's number one against the law, that two would cause a lot of risk for you as an organization, back pay, fines, damages, unpaid overtime. It would just be a complete mess if you were misclassifying if you're misclassifying employees as independent contractors. So we need to look at the nature of the work they do for you and determine whether or not they meet the criteria to be an independent contractor. And if they don't, regardless of how many hours you have them work, or if it's a temporary job that you have, or if they're in the probationary period, they would be an employee. And at that point, you have to pay them for all hours worked, overtime if they work over 40, unless they are classified as exempt. You have to follow all the legal requirements for paying unemployment tax on their payroll, whether or not you offer workman's comp and all of those protections. So the reason misclassification of employees as independent contractors is so huge is because those workers are not getting the benefits that they would be due for unemployment. And that is one way that employers and the Department of Labor find out that you've misclassified somebody. And especially right now, we're seeing furloughs and layoffs due to the pandemic and the impact to our economy. And so employers are getting all these questions, a little bit different than a typical unemployment response. And they're having to answer, if you get 2 or 3 pages worth of questions aimed at, what does the employee do for you and how do they work and what's their schedule? TWC is trying to figure out whether or not you've misclassified this person because you thought they were an independent contractor. You paid them with a 1099, but they went to go file unemployment because either you laid them off or they had a reduced workload compared to what they had before, known as partial unemployment. So it's very important that you get that classification correctly. So whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, public or private employer, you either have an employee or you have an independent contractor. So I'll go over some of the automatic independent contractors. If you want to hire somebody to come in and clean your offices, that's typically an independent contractor. Hiring somebody to do your lawn care, especially if you're a business where those things are completely unrelated. Those are examples of what would be an independent contractor. So you would pay them outright, not take out any taxes, and you would set them up as like a vendor in your accounts. So what the Department of Labor is doing is trying to clarify what some key factors are. And what they're looking at is the economic reality of the relationship. So is this person that is working for you dependent upon you financially? And you meaning your organization. Are they dependent on your organization financially? Or if you could think of it like, are all their eggs in your one basket? Or are they a landscape company that does many different, has many different commercial accounts? Then they're getting out there and they're doing work separate from that. So what you're looking at is, do they have the opportunity to profit or loss based on their own initiative? So if somebody owns a landscape company and they're just blowing and going and out there and very aggressive and signing up new accounts, they have the opportunity for greater profit based on that initiative or the investment of new equipment. But if they work for you and they're just working, 40 hours or a little bit over, a little bit less, they don't have that same opportunity because they work for you. So when they work over 40, that's one of the huge protections that an independent contractor doesn't get. Unless you meet an exemption under the Fair Labor Standards Act for a particular job, then you have to compensate the person doing that job for overtime, which is time and a half their regular rate for any hours worked over 40 in a work week, which means you have to track their time. So if you misclassify somebody, then you're likely not tracking their time and you can't produce records. And then that's where you get into huge amounts of trouble. So one of the, there's other core factors involved in whether or not the economic reality of the relationship is going to be clear that they're an independent contractor or they're an employee and they're dependent upon your organization alone to, provide income for their family or their household. So some of the factors are they free to work their own schedule? Do you just tell them I need the offices cleaned weekly and then they decide their own schedule? Or I just need my yard maintained. If that's the case, that's going to be independent contractor. If you tell them you need to be here from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and you get an hour lunch, that's going to be an employee. So you need to think in terms of the work schedule. Now, as I said, it's open in the comment period right now. And so we will be seeing a final rule coming out, but this is along the same lines as what it's been before. So this should not be completely staggering new information. It's just a different way to explain it. So if, think of how you have employees working remotely. If you had somebody that was hired to maintain your website, and they could pick or choose to work for you. Like, you told them you had a project and they could decide, yes, I want to take it, or no, I don't want to take it. Then that would be more along the lines of an independent contractor. Whereas if you assign something to an employee and you expect them to do it and they don't want to take it, then that's known as insubordination. People discipline and terminate for that. So that's more of the employee-employer relationship. If you are closely supervising the work that somebody does, the quality, the quantity, if they're not producing enough widgets or they don't have good quality, that's your employee. If, if you tell somebody that they can't go out and work for people that are your competitors, and you're trying to control that aspect and limit their ability to profit, then that's an employee. That's not an independent contractor. An independent contractor, the examples I've been using, somebody that's going to clean offices. I mean, these are easy ones, so I'm using them. But you feel free to call or email with a relationship where you're not paying somebody overtime, you're not taking taxes out, you're paying them with a 1099. Feel free to email us at hr@blakemanandassociates.com or call us at 936-582-2900, and we could go into more specifics, but I'm just hitting some big, easy to understand examples right now. But if you are going to tell somebody cleaning your office that they can't go clean another office, then maybe they're your employee, they're just working more of maintenance or janitorial work for you. So you want to think about that. So the final rule is going to clarify what your obligations are as an employer. And at that point, when we get the final rule, we will probably send out an email newsletter about it. So you can sign up for that from us. And then of course we share it with NCW and Sanford Tatum Risk Management. So that's just broad strokes, trying to clarify, that you've classified somebody correctly. I do want to hit on just the other classifications real quick. A lot of employers think classifying somebody as exempt or non-exempt or full or part-time is at their discretion. Full and part-time employees used to be completely up to an employer to decide, but the Affordable Care Act, ACA, changed that just for healthcare purposes. So they have defined somebody as being part-time, somebody that works less than 30 hours a week on average. So if you have an employee that works 30 hours or more, then they need to be provided healthcare benefits if you provide that for your other employees. And so that's a classification that you can decide, if you're part-time, you may not get our vacation benefits, but you can't decide that for the health insurance. Another classification that employers need to be aware of, it falls under the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that's exempt or non-exempt. And that is in terms of the requirement to pay overtime. So if an employee's job is such that it meets an exemption under the FLSA, then that means you do not have a duty to pay overtime for when they work over 40 in a work week. But it also means you have to meet different requirements, such as being paid on a salary basis and being paid a minimum salary under that threshold. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Are there any questions so far?
Thanks, Michelle. So I haven't received any questions in the chat box yet, but if you personally would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free to do that as well. Like Michelle mentioned, as a client of NCW and Sanford & Tatum, you have access to Blakeman & Associates, and you can email them personally or reach out to them via phone, or you can also go through, of course, myself or Tamara Cannon, and we can assist you with those questions. So moving on, Michelle, until we get some other additional questions, I know mental health has been a huge thing since the pandemic began, and it's something that many employers are struggling with now more than ever within the workplace. Can you kind of speak to it, that topic for our employers?
Sure. Well, mental health is a huge topic right now. Last week was Mental Health Week, and you know, we're humans and we seek to have that connection. So the workforce is different than it used to be because of this pandemic. We have a lot of people working remotely. That connection is lost. They're feeling isolated. Also, as a result of the pandemic, we've seen lots of layoffs and furloughs. And so just having that uncertainty and the struggle of if there's a financial loss, and also just health, being in poor health. So all these things have contributed to just a spike in mental health issues. So typically we see a spike around the holidays. Holidays can be very difficult times for people. So we've kind of in a double whammy time of the year because we're now in the fourth quarter, holidays will be approaching soon, and a lot of companies are still working remotely or have had layoffs. So, I mean, it couldn't be a worse time for mental health. It's kind of like that perfect storm, you could say. But you guys have heard of PTSD. They're calling it now, where they're calling a version of it PCSD. So instead of the traumatic syndrome, it is a COVID syndrome. There was a study done that when there was a SARS outbreak, which COVID is a form of SARS, that saw a 41% increase in people suffering from mental health issues. So, and we also saw a huge spike in suicides during that time. So some people might be wondering, you know, why is that a relevant employment issue? Well, we're all people, we're all human, we struggle. That's one of the things that connects us. And when you're dealing with employees in the workforce, if you turn a blind eye to this being a relevant employment topic, you could have a lot of difficulties. You need to realize that this could be something with your employees might be struggling with. And so we want to do some proactive things to try and, you know, not be blindsided by something tragic happening in the workplace. So we just want to always just be aware of what's going on with your team, check in on a regular basis, things like that. Right now, with all the uncertainty in the economy and what's going on with, you know, schools reopening and numbers spiking again, we go into what's known as a fight or flight mode. And that underlying anxiety and stress that comes from that affects you just exponentially. So it can affect your health. Fear of the unknown is huge. And I mean, there's so much up in the air right now with the voting, the election outcome, what's going to happen, COVID, unemployment, at record highs, layoffs, oil and gas industry. I mean, it's just enough to just stress anybody out. So you have that, and then on top of it, you have the holidays, where maybe your holiday tradition was going to see family out of town. Well, now a lot of people aren't traveling the way that they used to. The airline industry has been impacted tremendously as a result of this as well. So we've got that. We've also got family members that maybe, even though we could physically drive there or get there, should we go there because maybe they're in a high risk category for COVID. So maybe we're more concerned and shielding that. So all of these things are contributing to that. So what we want to do is we want to, be honest with our employees. If raises are not going to happen this year, if Christmas bonuses are not going to happen, we need to be honest and let them know that, because that's part of that fear of uncertainty. People can address things when they know what it's going to be, but whether or not they know that they're going to be able to make ends meet, or whether or not they know, should they start their Christmas shopping. So just being honest. Some companies are looking at, instead of doing like a big company Christmas party or a year-end party, maybe doing a few little smaller events where you could just get outside, social distancing. We've heard so much about this virus, but being outside in the fresh air is good. The recycled air that we have in the workplace or in a facility, they're saying it can still transfer some of the spores and the virus and so on. So being outside is good. Also, being outside is good for vitamin D. When we're staying inside all the time and we're, staying in our cars and getting everything delivered, and we're not getting out in the sun, vitamin D does have an impact on our overall health, both for boosting immunity, and also just for that positive, we've had gorgeous weather, that positive impact it has to your demeanor. So encouraging employees to get out, maybe walk during lunch, or have a picnic or a sack lunch, and just, telling stories and trying to connect and relate to one another. Making sure that your supervisors are aware of their responsibility. So supervisors have a huge job. And so often as employers, we focus on just the supervisory role of getting the widgets made or getting the trucks out on time, or, taking care of the customers. And we overlook all the other responsibilities that a supervisor has to be that front line of risk defense for your organization. So when they notice things that are different with their employees, whether you notice somebody's withdrawn, or you notice their attendance is sporadic, or you notice maybe they're off and they might be under the influence or something, that is something that a supervisor needs to be aware of, how their employees are on a regular basis, so they can tell when something is different. So supervisors really need to be present, whether it's the warehouse floor, or if you have an employee working remotely, checking in. We tend to think out of sight, out of mind. And now more than ever, we need to keep those connections. We need to touch base. You could have Zoom calls like we're doing right now. You could have regular check-ins. You could shoot emails, text. We have all this technology available to us now. But I've heard so many cases of where employees are working from home and you're just not talking, whereas if you'd be in the office, you would chit chat about your weekend, or about, the kids or the weather or whatever. So we don't want to lose that connection. We want to make sure that we make a concerted effort and we make that a priority. I want to go back a minute. If a supervisor does recognize somebody acting a little bit off, depending upon your organization, if you have a knowledgeable person in HR, I would say first, have the supervisor go and talk to HR and just kind of bring their concerns. And then the two together can kind of work on, is there something there? Is there a little bit off? What should we say? What should we not say? And just kind of just engage with that employee and evaluate what's going on. So we want to stay connected. We want to continue to do things like check in with somebody and say, how's it going? You might want to consider things like loans, where maybe you didn't have a loan program before as an employer, but now you're looking at the holidays and we're trying to alleviate some of that stress. Well, a huge stressor is financial. So if your company is not able to offer bonuses or raises like they used to in the past, maybe you could offer a little bit of a loan that an employee could pay back through payroll deduction. Be sure you get signed authorization so that you don't violate Texas payday law. And we can talk about that more in depth if you need to, but even just a small loan, or even if you're financially able as the employer to forgive the loan, just think what a blessing that could be to somebody at Christmas time, especially, if you've been able to, if you had to reduce hours or some of their family members have been laid off. So think of that. And if you can't give money or support financially that way, you could at least consider maybe an extra time off, because if somebody couldn't fly before and they're going to drive, so just checking in and showing that flexibility. But more than anything, being transparent and honest with your employees about what's going on, instead of just avoiding the comment of well, I don't want to tell them we can't have a Christmas bonus this year, so we're just going to have the party and we're just not going to hand out checks. I mean, that uncertainty creates a tremendous amount of stress on people. You're talking about, a physical impact as well as an emotional impact, higher blood pressure, higher pulse, just your immune system goes down, which, you need that help right now to fight off the viruses. So the things that maybe we don't want to think about or talk about can be adding to the problem. They can be adding to that stress. That fear of the unknown is huge. The impact that toll that it takes on people, we just want to try and do what we can to minimize that impact on them. That is the bulk of what I wanted to say on this topic. I don't know if anybody has some questions, or Elizabeth, maybe you had some stuff emailed to you before, anything like that.
So if someone, there are a couple on
just
this
in a
topic.
nutshell.
There are a couple on this topic. If someone has concerns about an employee's stability, mental health, does it give them ability to fire them? Can we talk through that?
Okay, so what I would say there is employers are able, yes, we have employment at will, and you can fire anybody at any time for any reason, but we're in the business of reducing an employer's risk. So we want to be aware always of the structure that we can work within, whether it's the employment laws on a federal level, state level, or whether we need to look at best practices, company policy, and precedent. So if you have concerns about an employee, you might be thinking it's, mental health, but let's focus on the work. You're not doing anybody any favors. You're not doing anybody any favors if you're unhappy with somebody's work or you have concerns about it, but you don't talk to them about it. Employees need and they want your feedback. They want to know where they stand with you. And most employees want to do a good job. So if you're noticing somebody slipping in their attention to detail, or you're noticing attendance issues or tardiness issues that weren't there before, sit down and talk to them, pull them aside in a more private forum and ask them what's going on. Let them know that you've recognized that things are a little different. Is there anything going on that we can help you with? What can we talk about? And if an employee is bringing up a concern, like a real concern about depression or something like that. If they ask you for time off, there might be laws that you need to look at, such as ADA. Mental health issues are covered under ADA if it's to the level that it substantially limits a major life activity. Mental and physical are also covered under FMLA. So that's for employers that are 50 or more. So you need to look at, dissect what requirements apply. But if an employee is having a difficult time and they're mentioning something very serious, like harming themselves, then you have an obligation to, reach out to authorities and try to get them some help that way. If somebody needs to go through a program or something like that, some of your health insurance plans might have EAP assistance to where they can, EAP programs where they can get assistance they need, or maybe even there's Zoom mental health calls, Zoom counseling. Look at some resources that you can point them to. But if somebody needs to off or something like that, my first thought would not be, let's look at termination. Although if somebody is, nothing gives an employee a right to cause serious issues in the workplace. So if somebody is, acting erratically, threatening in some way, those things are never okay. If made damages or wrecked a truck or seem to be careless and they're a driver for you, then you can certainly change their job on a temporary basis. You could look at leave. You could certainly look at disciplinary action, but we want to focus on what they've done in the workplace and what the requirement is in the workplace before we go straight to that adverse action. And of course, things like this are going to be very tricky. And I would say that, my guidance on pretty much any employee issue is, if it's not a routine automatic answer where a supervisor knows what the policy is and is aware of what maybe some HR protections might be, then the best answer is to say, put what you want in writing and let me get with the team and I'll get back to you. Or let me get with the team and then I'll get back to you. And then you take time to evaluate what's going on. You buy time for yourself because you can't take back something that you've said that you shouldn't have said. And as a supervisor, you represent the company. And that's why supervisory training is just such a big deal, because they said them saying the wrong thing. Maybe, they're focused on getting the trucks out. I use that as an easy example. And somebody comes to you and you're like, say, put on your big boy pants and get out to work. I mean, something even as reactionary as that can cause huge concerns for the employer long term. So we want to know our people, and we want to buy the time to get with HR or other resources that you have. These topics can be very complicated. I'll say that in a nutshell, you want to know what your company policies are. You want to know some basics on employment law. But before you take any adverse action for something related to a mental health condition, just bounce it off of us or some other trusted resource, so that we can help you not say the wrong thing, help protect your organization from liability, and just walk through. Some people call just to talk out a situation and make sure that they've thought of every different way to look at it. And it's just certainly better to do that than say the wrong thing and create risk, because once it's said and once it's done, you can't take it back. So, but be specific about what the work requirement is and what they're failing to meet. And then, you want to be consistent. So if you've always done first, second writtens, and then a final for tardiness, then I'm not saying you have to change that process and treat somebody better than you would somebody else. But if there are extenuating circumstances, let's look at an accommodation under ADA if one would that would be applicable, or let's look at leave for somebody to go get help if that law would be triggered. Because not thinking about those things and treating that person straight, 1, 2, 3, you're out like you would somebody else, could create risk. It could be interference with some of their legal rights under these other employment laws. So just buy some time and let's talk it out, because it's not an easy cut and dry decision.
Thank you, Michelle. So another big topic I know employers are struggling with, and I know we did a seminar on this not too long ago, is diversity and inclusion within the workplace. Can you speak on that and how an employer can, different steps that they can take to be leaders within this area, and if they do feel as though they're lagging, some pointers to maybe point them in the right direction to become a leader?
Okay, so it just seems like we are dealing with so much in 2020. I mean, racism is a huge issue right now. I mean, we're seeing just, protests and everything else. So it's a huge, huge hot topic right now. Also, there are other rights that are coming to the forefront, whether it's gay and lesbian community, or whether it's, equality in pay. So all of these things, if you think about diversity, you think about race and gender and national origin and all of those things. So when we think about diversity and inclusion, we want to foster an environment where we have a diverse workforce. It's been proven that when you get together a team that does not all think and act the same, that is not all the same background, whether it's religion or upbringing, the ideas, the brainstorming that can occur is just so valuable, because we're not getting into that kind of groupthink mentality. We're thinking outside the box, we're encouraging an open exchange of ideas. So there's been proven that diversity in the workplace is beneficial. Also, the opposite of not having a diverse workforce could look like discrimination in the workplace, could be discrimination in the workplace. So, there's benefits to having a diverse, and then there's, deterrents and ramifications for not. So the things that we want to do as an employer is more than just having, an annual training where we say there should be no discrimination or harassment in the workplace. And, we also include diversity and inclusion in that training. You want to do more than just that one check the box activity annually. You want to really take the time as leaders in your organizations and look at your mission, look at your values, look at what your culture values and pays attention to and is acknowledging. So we want to look at it objectively and say, am I diverse? If somebody came in here with a different religion or a different ethnic makeup or a different sexual preference, would they be welcomed? Would we focus on the work and not ostracize somebody for being different? So you want to ask yourself some of these hard questions and really evaluate so that you can determine what work you need to do to address this issue in your workplace. If you say you want a diverse workforce, but then you hire somebody and your team doesn't welcome them, or they're not given the same opportunities, then you've just created risk for your organization, because it's going to look and feel that way to that person. So we want to look at things like commitment from the top down to have that. If I've heard people say this, well, we choose from the pool of applicants that applies here. So take a hard look at the applicants that apply. Are you only getting, one race or one gender typically for that job? So then what could you do as an employer to broaden that net, to cast a wider net, so you're getting different ages, races, religions, genders. So look at, your recruiting. Could you go to TWC and try to partner with them to employ some of these unemployed people? Could you go to schools, trade schools or high schools, and try to look at internship programs? Could you look at a referral system from your customers? If your customers are from a broader area, can you reach out to them in some way? Can you, encourage greater participation from the team that you have? It's, again, you go back to supervisors. Can't underscore how important of a job that is. But let's say that you have a mission statement and company value and culture that invites diversity and wants to include every member. And your office does things such as, team building exercises and potlucks where somebody brings, a traditional dish from their house and we all share in it and learn about other cultures or something. Or where, somebody's ideas are everybody's ideas are looked at as being valuable. Even if you don't choose them, do you encourage them? But let's say the shop or the warehouse is removed. Do we know what's going on there? Do we know that same commitment is being felt in the shop or in the field? Even in the field, it's much harder because they're more removed. But when we hold our supervisors accountable for some of these things, in addition to, getting the trucks out and inventory and budget, then we're telling our supervisors that this aspect of their job is important as well. And, again, there's no replacement for an engaged, visible, accessible supervisor. So if a supervisor sees, how employees are treating somebody, they should be cluing into that. They should be immediately noticing that and putting a stop to it, figuring out, why is this happening? What can we do about it to make it better? A lot of orientations, onboarding, try to buddy up people, partner people, and they might have great intentions in the HR department, but by the time it gets to the shop floor, we lose that aspect of it. But think about things like that. Think about a buddy system where, you put a little bit of thought into who would be the best, trained driver to supervise this new employee, to get them on the right track. Is it somebody that has a good attitude and values everybody? Or is it somebody that you think, harbors resentment towards certain racial groups or something like that? So just trying to know that and making a few tweaks here or there in how we onboard and train on the job and work with our employees can make a difference. So, just think about even something like dress code, right? If people are wearing things that have racial slurs on them, or, if you're not paying attention to what somebody wears, that is within your control. You can put that in we recommend, it's in your harassment policy, also in your dress code policy. It's a supervisor. If you see somebody with a hat slogan or a t-shirt slogan or something, or even, a racially charged tattoo, things like that, you can ask them to be covered up. You can ask them to be changed, but look and make sure that your policy is written in a way that it gives you that tool to do that. But it's not likely your HR person is going to see that if they're at a different location or in an office, but that frontline supervisor will see it. You also need to stop derogatory communication in the workplace when you see it happening, when you're aware of it. So if an employee comes to you and lets you know something that was said in the lunchroom, you need to get on that. That right there is giving you an opportunity to try and get to the bottom of something and maybe fix a situation that has the potential to escalate into a real issue. But we want to look at the way that we're doing things in the workplace, both with what we do in training, what we hold supervisors accountable for, how broad is our scope for recruiting. We want to look at, growth ladders, somebody that's hired in, does everybody have an equal opportunity to grow with the company? Are we looking for those diverse ideas and growing those people? Take some hard looks at the way that your company operates and try to improve diversity and try to make sure that you're including everybody and that everybody feels valued in the workplace. If somebody brings up an idea or suggestion, just because you don't do it doesn't mean that you can't still make them feel that feedback or that input was valuable. Taking that into consideration and not making, a snap decision shows that you value that input. We want to look at our, when we promote from within, do we give everybody opportunity? We have criteria that we're using that, is objective and not biased. Are we really just being an open and welcoming workforce? So we want to think about those sorts of things when it comes to diversity inclusion. So just just to recap, it's more than just a one-time training. I've checked the box and I've done that training and everybody's an adult and they should just know how to act. We have a greater obligation than that. And, putting our head in the sand right now when these things are on the news, riots and protests and, this highly charged election. And we're just dealing with so much right now in the workforce. It would be tempting to just put your head in the sand and try to avoid mental health issues and racism and diversity in the workplace, because I just want to focus on getting those trucks out. I just want to focus on what I know is here and now, and I can just avoid all of this difficult to handle stuff. But when you do that, you create an environment where things can get out of hand. It's an unhealthy environment, and there's so many, we could talk forever about the ramifications to your bottom line as a result of an unhealthy, not engaged workforce. So.
Thanks, Michelle. So
Sums up that.
An employer has never received any complaints regarding diversity and inclusion, but if someone does come complaining about these different topics, how do you suggest the HR department go about proper record keeping regarding that complaint?
Okay. One of the things that I've seen from a lot of, we deal with a lot of clients, is a lack of a proper structured complaint handling investigation process. So employee complaints are huge. That is somebody letting you know, giving you an opportunity to fix a problem. Now, we don't want to only take one person's word for something. We don't know what everybody's agenda is, and we don't want to, jump to action before we know the full scope of the problem, or if there's a problem at all. So complaint handling and investigation kind of go hand in hand. So when an employee comes to you and makes a complaint, and it could be somebody that was part of it, or somebody that a coworker confided in, or somebody that witnessed something that made them uncomfortable. Regardless of if it's any one of those, you have been given a great opportunity to dig into the situation and try to be proactive and fix something before it gets out of hand. So we want to, a proper complaint handling, I don't know how much time we have, but a proper complaint handling process would start with, whether it's to the supervisor or to HR directly, the supervisor knowing to escalate it to HR. And then we want to realize that we are on a clock, that time is important. So I like to document when or how a complaint was brought in, date, time, and then the steps that I've taken to address it. So you hear that person out. I like to get a written statement, because sometimes you have to be in a position where you have to discern who is credible and what took place, because you're not always going to get cut and dry, video or text or proof of something happened. Many times you're dealing with a he said, she said, and you have to draw conclusions. So one of the ways you can do that is by getting a written statement and answering a set of questions. You want to try to get to the bottom of it. You do want to ask some of the same questions to other people that you speak with. So the person that brings it to you, the complainant, you want to ask them who was involved, who witnessed it, things like that. And then you want to, after you've identified those people, you want to talk to those people. I have a lot of guidance. I can't possibly sum up all of the steps for this big process of complaint handling and investigation in a few minutes, but I can say that realize it's time sensitive. You want to dig into the details and determine what is actually going on. And then you want to determine if something that's taken place has violated your policy, and then you want to take appropriate action. So these are the steps you want to take, and those things should be well documented. But you don't want to take one person's word over another, because as I said, you don't know what their agenda is. So you want to try and determine what happened. You want to give everybody that you want your employees to feel comfortable to come to you. And the way that that trust is built and that happens is by doing what you say you're going to do. So when you get a complaint, being able to address it quickly and thoroughly to where employees are going to know that they can trust that process, that if I go to HR, it is okay, it's a safe place. And they know that their concerns are being heard and they feel valued. So when a complaint comes up, that is how I would handle it. I would dig into it and then try to evaluate what took place and act quickly. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thanks so much for everyone that attended. Please save the date for our next Clear Up the Chaos, second Tuesday of every month. The next one is taking place November 10th at 10 a.m. So we hope you'll be able to join us. And if any other questions come to you after this wraps up, feel free to email myself and I can get those questions directly sent over to Michelle for additional guidance. So I hope you'll have a wonderful week, and thanks again for taking part. Bye.